I'm going to tell you something that happened to me when I was 68 years old that completely changed everything I thought I knew about God, about abortion, and about my own soul. What Jesus told me on the other side will shock you like it shocked me. I'm 70 now, and I'm finally ready to share this. My name is Miriam. I grew up strictly Catholic in Pittsburgh. Baptized as a baby, First Communion at 7, Confirmation at 12. I was a good Catholic girl. I did everything the church told me to do, but when I was 22 years old, something happened that destroyed my faith completely. I was raped by someone I trusted, and I got pregnant from that rape. I was unmarried, terrified, and I felt like my whole world was falling apart. The church said abortion was murder. My parents would have disowned me if they knew. I felt trapped. I felt like I had no choice. So I made the decision that would haunt me for the next 46 years. I had an abortion. After that, I walked away from God completely. I became an atheist. I told myself there was no God because if there was a God, He wouldn't have let this happen to me. I wouldn't have been raped. I wouldn't have had to make that choice. For almost 5 decades, I carried this shame and guilt around like a weight on my chest. I never told anyone. Not my husband when I got married at 30. Not my daughter who I had when I was 32. Nobody knew. I lived a normal life on the outside. I was a nurse for 40 years. I had a good marriage. My daughter grew up and gave me grandchildren. But inside, I was dying. Inside, I believed that if there was a hell, I was going there for sure. I had murdered my own child. That's what I believed. That's what I carried. Then 2 years ago, I got sick. Really sick. I started having terrible stomach pain that wouldn't go away. I went to the hospital and they admitted me right away. They diagnosed me with C. difference colitis, which is a bacterial infection in the intestines. They gave me medication, but nothing was working. The pain kept getting worse and worse. What they didn't know at first was that my body was shutting down. I was developing an autoimmune disease called TTP. My kidneys were failing. My blood was basically poisoning itself. I was retaining fluid so fast that I gained 40 pounds in just 3 days. I couldn't move my legs. I was paralyzed from the chest down. And this one doctor, this hospitalist, he kept telling me I was drug seeking. He thought I was faking it for pain medication. I knew I was dying. I could feel it. My body was grey. I was grey. And finally, after I made such a scene that they had to take me seriously, they did the right tests and realized I was in complete kidney failure. They rushed me to dialysis. They started treating me for TTP. But by then, I was too far gone. I don't remember the exact moment it happened. 1 minute I was in that hospital bed, and the next minute I was somewhere else entirely. I was standing in this place that looked like a park. There was green grass under my feet, trees in the distance, a blue sky with white clouds and birds flying. It was so peaceful, so beautiful, and I wasn't in pain anymore. I looked to my left and there was a man standing there. I just knew immediately who it was. I knew it was Jesus. Don't ask me how I knew. I just knew the same way you know your own name. And the first words out of my mouth were, "Oh my God, you're real. You actually exist." He smiled at me, this warm, loving smile. And he opened his arms like he was inviting me to hug him. So I did. I walked over and I hugged him and I started crying. I couldn't believe I was there. I couldn't believe he was real. I had spent 46 years telling myself God didn't exist, and here I was standing with Jesus. He put his arm around me and said, "Come on, Miriam. We have a lot of work to do." And he started walking with me. He introduced me to my guides. Archangel Michael was there. Mother Mary was there. Saint Germain. And we went into this golden capsule, this room made of light, and there was something like a screen in front of us, but it wasn't a TV. There were no wires or plugs. It was just there. And then my whole life started playing out in front of me. From the moment I was conceived until the moment I died in that hospital bed. Every single thing I had ever experienced. Every thought I'd ever had. Every feeling. Every moment of joy and every moment of pain. And I had to relive all of it. But this time, I also felt what other people were feeling. I heard their thoughts. I experienced their pain. I had to relive being sexually abused as a child, something I had buried so deep I barely remembered it. I had to relive the rape when I was 22. I had to watch myself walk into that clinic for the abortion. I had to feel all of that shame and guilt and fear all over again. And I also had to feel what my abusers were feeling. I had to understand their pain, their brokenness, their own trauma that led them to hurt me. It was the hardest thing I've ever experienced. But Jesus and the others, they were right there with me. They paused the screen whenever I needed to process something. They let me cry. They let me scream. They let me feel everything I needed to feel. And they loved me through all of it. They never judged me. They never condemned me. They just loved me. When it was over, Archangel Michael took me into his own golden capsule. Just the two of us. He had me kneel down first and we prayed. Then he told me to stand up and tilt my head back and hold my arms out. And he started speaking Psalm 91 over me. His hand was raised and there was this white beam of light coming from it, hitting my soul directly. Psalm 91 says, "He who dwells in the shelter of the Most High will rest in the shadow of the Almighty. I will say of the Lord, He is my refuge and my fortress, my God, in whom I trust." As he spoke those words, I felt this warmth and this love that I had never felt in my entire life. Not from my parents. Not from my husband. Not from anyone. It was pure, unconditional love. And I started weeping uncontrollably. When he finished, he asked me, "Miriam, why are you crying?" And I was so honest with him. I couldn't lie even if I wanted to. I said, "I've been such a horrible person to all of you. I didn't believe in you. I spent 46 years saying you didn't exist. I denied Jesus. I denied God. I don't even know what I'm doing here. I should be in hell right now." And Archangel Michael looked at me with such gentleness and said, "I'm not here to judge you, Miriam. I'm here to love you." That moment changed everything for me. I understood right then that heaven isn't about being perfect. It's about being loved exactly as you are. But I still had this huge weight on my chest. The abortion. I still hadn't dealt with that. And I think Jesus knew because within the first 5 minutes of being there with him at this table, this golden table where we sat together, he brought it up. He said, "Oh, and about that abortion." My heart stopped. This was it. This was where he was going to tell me I was going to hell. This was where he was going to condemn me for murdering my child. I braced myself. But what he said next completely shattered everything I thought I knew. He said, "Miriam, you need to understand something. You can't kill a soul. That's not how this works. All you did was send him back to us. And we took care of him. We loved him. We kept him safe. And when you were ready, when the time was right, we sent him back to you. He's waiting for you on earth right now." I didn't understand at first. I said, "What do you mean he's waiting for me?" And Jesus smiled and said, "Your grandson. The one your daughter just had 3 months ago. That's him. That's the soul you thought you lost. We don't lose souls, Miriam. We just redirect them." I couldn't breathe. My grandson. My beautiful baby grandson that I had been holding and loving for the past 3 months. That was the child I had aborted 46 years ago. The soul I thought I had destroyed. The guilt I had carried for almost half a century. And he was never gone. He was always meant to be mine. Just not in that moment. Not when I was 22 and broken and traumatized. But now. Now when I was ready to love him the right way. Jesus saw me processing this and he said, "Do you understand what I'm telling you? There is no condemnation here. There is no punishment. You were raped, Miriam. You were traumatized. You were terrified. You made the only choice you felt you could make in that moment. And I don't condemn you for that. The religious leaders on earth, they made abortion into this unforgivable sin. But that's not my heart. That's not my teaching." He referenced Matthew 9 verse 13 where he said, "Go and learn what this means. I desire mercy, not sacrifice. For I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners." He said, "I came for the broken ones, Miriam. I came for the ones who made mistakes. I came for the ones who thought they were beyond redemption. That's who I came for, not the ones who think they're perfect." I was sobbing at this point. I asked him, So you're saying I'm not going to hell? You're saying I'm forgiven? And he looked at me like I had asked the strangest question. He said, Miriam, you were always forgiven, before you even asked, before you even knew you needed it. My grace isn't something you earn, it's something you receive. Romans 5 verse 8 says, but God demonstrates his own love for us in this: while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. I died for you before you ever made that choice. My forgiveness was already there. But then I asked him the question that was burning in my heart. I said, but Jesus, the church says abortion is murder. The Bible says thou shalt not kill. How can you say I'm forgiven when I broke one of the 10 commandments? And this is where what he told me will probably shock a lot of people. He said, Miriam, let me explain something to you about how souls work. When a woman gets pregnant, a soul is invited to join that body. But the soul doesn't fully attach until the body is ready to sustain life on its own. In the early stages of pregnancy, the soul is hovering, waiting, preparing. It's like knocking on a door but not fully entering the house yet. When a pregnancy ends, whether through miscarriage or abortion or any other reason, the soul simply returns to heaven. It returns to me, and I hold that soul until the timing is right. He continued, the religious laws you were taught were created by men trying to understand divine truth. And some of those laws are right. Murder is wrong. Taking a life out of hatred or violence or selfishness, that grieves my heart. But what happened to you wasn't murder, Miriam. You weren't trying to destroy a soul. You were a traumatized young woman trying to survive. And that soul you thought you killed? He's fine. He's more than fine. He's exactly where he was always meant to be. I said, but what about all the pro-life people who say every abortion is murder? What about all the Christians who condemn women like me? And Jesus looked sad when I asked that. He said, they're speaking from fear, not from love. They're speaking from religious law, not from understanding my heart. Do I value life? Yes. Every life is precious to me. Every soul matters. But do I condemn a rape victim for making an impossible choice in an impossible situation? Never. Do I send women to hell for having abortions? Never. He quoted John 8 verse 7, the story of the woman caught in adultery. He said, when the religious leaders wanted to stone that woman, I told them, let any one of you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone at her. And they all walked away because not one of them was sinless. Miriam, the people who condemn you for your abortion, they're throwing stones. But they're not sinless. They've never walked in your shoes. They don't know your pain. And I don't give them permission to judge you. He said, I told people in Matthew 7 verse 1, do not judge, or you too will be judged. The Christians who spend their time condemning women who've had abortions, they're missing the entire point of my message. My message was always about love. Always about mercy. Always about redemption, not about condemnation. I asked him, so what do you want people to know about abortion? What's the truth? And he said this very carefully. He said, I want people to know that every situation is different. Every woman's story is different. Some abortions happen out of fear. Some happen out of trauma. Some happen because of rape or incest or medical necessity. Some happen because a woman feels she has no other choice. And I see every single one of those situations with compassion. He said, yes, I value life. Yes, I want people to choose life when they can. But I also know that earth is complicated. I know that poverty is real. I know that abuse is real. I know that mental illness is real. I know that rape is real. And I don't condemn women who are facing impossible choices in impossible situations. He referenced Psalm 139 verses 13 to 16 which says, for you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. He said, yes, I form every soul with purpose. Yes, I know every soul before it's born. But I also know that earth is a place of free will. And sometimes the timing isn't right. Sometimes the circumstances aren't right. And when a soul returns to me before birth, I don't see that as a failure. I see that as a redirection. I was starting to understand, but I still had questions. I said, What about women who have abortions just because it's inconvenient? What about women who use abortion as birth control? And Jesus said, Miriam, do you really think that happens as often as you've been told? Do you really think most women take that decision lightly? I see into every heart. I know every motivation. And I can tell you that most women who have abortions are in pain. They're scared. They're desperate. They're not callous or careless. They're human. He said, but even in cases where a woman makes a selfish choice, even then, I offer forgiveness. Because that's what grace is. Grace isn't just for the people who had good reasons. Grace is for everyone. 1 John 1 verse 9 says, if we confess our sins, He is faithful and just and will forgive us our sins and purify us from all unrighteousness. All unrighteousness, Miriam. Not just the sins that seem forgivable. All of them. Then he asked me a question that I'll never forget. He said, Miriam, what would you say to other women who've had abortions and are carrying the same guilt and shame you carried? And I thought about it. I thought about all those years I spent hating myself. All those years I spent believing I was beyond redemption. And I started crying again. I said, I would tell them they're forgiven. I would tell them God doesn't hate them. I would tell them they're not going to hell. I would tell them that Jesus loves them exactly as they are. And Jesus smiled and said, then that's your message. That's why you're going back. To tell them. I said, going back? I'm going back. And he nodded. He said, your work on earth isn't done yet. You have a message to share. You have women to reach. Women who think they're beyond my love. Women who think one mistake disqualifies them from heaven. You're going back to tell them the truth. But before he sent me back, he wanted to teach me something else. He pulled me aside privately, just the two of us, and he asked me, Miriam, what are you still struggling with? What's still bothering you? And I was honest with him. I said, I don't understand why all the abuse happened to me. Why was I sexually abused as a child? Why was I raped at 22? Why did I have to go through all of that pain? Where were you? Why didn't you protect me? And Jesus asked me something that seemed strange at first. He said, Miriam, imagine that every traumatic experience you went through as a child is a child living inside you. The 5-year-old who was abused. The 12-year-old who was bullied. The 22-year-old who was raped. They're all children inside you right now. What would you do with those children? And without thinking, I said, I'd kick them out. They're old enough to take care of themselves. Jesus looked at me sadly and said, okay, I see we have more work to do here. And he kept talking to me. I don't remember everything he said, but I remember at the end, he asked me the same question again. He said, now that you understand, how would you treat those children inside you? Knowing that those children are you, what would you do? And suddenly it clicked. I understood. I said, I would acknowledge them. I would listen to them. I would nurture them. I would love them. And Jesus smiled and said, that's beautiful. And if you could name them, what would you name them? And I thought about it and I said, I would name them all love. Because it was love that brought me into this life. It was love that orchestrated everything I needed to heal. It was love that gave me opportunities to grow. He said, yes, everything is love, Miriam. Even the painful things. Even the traumatic things. They were all opportunities for you to learn how to love yourself. How to forgive yourself. How to heal. And that's when I understood why I had to go through everything I went through. Not because God was punishing me. Not because I deserved it. But because my soul needed to learn these lessons. My soul needed to grow. Jesus told me something that I think applies to everyone. He said, every person on earth is carrying wounded children inside them. Every person has trauma. Every person has pain. And the way to heal is not to ignore those children or reject those children or pretend they don't exist. The way to heal is to love them. To accept them. To integrate them back into who you are. He referenced Matthew 18 verse 3 where he said, truly I tell you, unless you change and become like little children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. He explained, I wasn't just talking about being innocent or naive. I was talking about reconnecting with those parts of yourself that you've rejected. The parts that were hurt. The parts that were wounded. The parts that you're ashamed of. Those are the parts that need the most love. And when you learn to love those parts, that's when you can enter the kingdom. Because the kingdom of heaven is love, Miriam. It's not a place. It's a state of being. He taught me that acceptance is the same thing as love. He said, tell everyone that acceptance is synonymous with love. You can't truly love someone or something without accepting it first. And that includes yourself. You can't love yourself while rejecting parts of yourself. You can't love yourself while hating your past. You can't love yourself while carrying shame. You have to accept it all. Accept your mistakes. Accept your trauma. Accept your choices. Accept your humanity. That's what love is. He told me that this is what has been trying to teach humanity for 2,000 years, but people keep missing it. They keep focusing on rules and laws and judgments instead of focusing on love. He said, I gave 2 commandments. Love God and love your neighbor as yourself. Everything else falls under those 2. And most people can't even love themselves, so how can they love their neighbor? I asked him about hell. I said, so if you're all about love and forgiveness, does that mean there's no hell? Does everyone go to heaven? And he said, hell is not what you've been taught. Hell is not a place of eternal torture where I send people I'm mad at. Hell is separation from love. Hell is what you create when you refuse to accept love, refuse to give love, refuse to be love. Some souls choose that separation. Some souls are so hurt, so broken, so consumed by darkness that they can't accept the light. And I honor their free will. I don't force anyone into heaven. He said, but the idea that I would torture someone forever for making mistakes on earth? That's not me. That's not my heart. That's fear-based religion trying to control people. Yes, there are consequences for actions. Yes, souls go through purification processes. Yes, some souls need more healing than others. But eternal torture? No. That's not love. And I am love. Before I came back, Jesus gave me one final message. He said, tell people that heaven is not a religion. Heaven is a location and it's the highest frequency of love. You don't get there by following rules. You don't get there by being perfect. You don't get there by never making mistakes. You get there by learning how to love. By learning how to forgive. By learning how to accept. That's all I've ever asked of anyone. He sent me back with very specific instructions. He said, you will share this message. You will tell people what you saw here. And you will help women who have had abortions understand that they are loved, they are forgiven, and they are not condemned. I tried to argue with him. I said, why me? I don't even know how to explain all of this. And he said, you will find the words when the time comes. And then I was back in my body, back in that hospital bed. The pain came rushing back. The paralysis, the sickness. But I was alive. And I was different. Everything looked different. Colors were brighter. Sounds were clearer. I could see things I'd never seen before. It was like I had been living my whole life with a filter over my eyes and suddenly the filter was gone. It took me 8 more weeks to recover. 8 weeks of dialysis and plasma treatments and blood transfusions. 8 weeks of learning how to walk again. 8 weeks of processing everything that had happened to me on the other side. When I finally got to go home, when I finally got to hold my grandson again, I wept. Because I knew it was him. I knew it was the soul I thought I'd lost. And he was perfect. I'm 70 years old now. I've been back for 2 years. And I'm finally ready to share this message with the world. If you've had an abortion, please hear me. You are not condemned. You are not going to hell. Jesus does not hate you. He loves you. He sees your pain. He sees your trauma. He sees your fear. And he offers you nothing but compassion and grace. If you're carrying guilt and shame about a choice you made, please let it go. That guilt is not from God. That shame is not from Jesus. It's from religion. It's from people who think they have the right to judge you. But they don't. Only God can judge. And God chooses mercy every single time.